Hey everybody, this is Anne and welcome back to Painting Big. Today we're going to refine our 28mm face by adding shadows, blush, lip, and other details. Alright, let's get to it. Okay, so although I started with a fairly dark skin tone, Swarthy Flesh, we have gone over most of that, and sometimes I'll like to add a little bit of extra shadow to a skin tone. So for most Caucasian type skin tones, the color that I want to use to build shadows is something like Ruddy Leather. And I use Ruddy Leather because it's got a reddish cast to it, so it's a reddish brown. You could technically use almost any reddish brown. You only want to add a little bit. You do want it, of course, to be darker than your skin tone. This is our Swarthy Flesh. Add just a bit of that and see what it comes out to. Also remember, we'll be thinning this paint since we'll be layering it on, which means that it can look fairly dark because when we thin it, it's going to dry lighter than it looks. So let's just mix this together. What I really want is just a skin tone that's darker. I don't want the Ruddy Leather to totally overwhelm the skin tone, and it hasn't. It's darkened it, it's made it more of a reddish brown. This is a pretty good shadow color. Technically, shadows are often cooler, and since this is a darker color, it will read as cooler. We'll do another color theory video, probably, in the future, talking about cool and warm and how they act to draw the eye or repel it. But for now, just understand that usually you want a shadow to look a little cooler, and you can achieve that by just darkening the color. So we're going to take this, there's a little, let's test the consistency. I'm going to use a very small brush. I want to see, I don't want it to be too thin because I want it to show up. And so if you thin it too much and you try to layer it on, you just won't be able to see it. So the places we want to put additional shadows on a 28mm are really rather few. So one place we want to put it, and this again would be the same with larger models and busts, you just have more room to do it. And you probably would be able to add in a couple more subtle shadows on those larger models. But one is at the inner crease of the eyes. So under the brow ridge, you want to have a bit of a shadow right in there. And that's because the brow ridge tends to overhang the inner corner of the eye, so having a shadow there feels natural to us. It also helps to kind of bring the eyes out more, to add in a little bit more drama. Now you don't extend that shadow all the way to the outside area of the eye under the brow ridge, because here the light tends to actually hit. So it's just that inner corner. If the nose is pretty shallowly sculpted, as it is on most 28s, we can add a little bit more shadow to the side of the nose on both sides. On bigger models, I would probably outline the nostrils a little bit as well. But on a little model like this, I find that's mostly wasted. We want to do the underside of the nose, which I think I mentioned last video. Just paint in a triangle of shadow underneath there. Helps to make sure, again, that the nose shows up. And then I'm going to do the underside of the jaw. It's just pretty much reinforcing somewhere where shadow always appears anyway. We're also going to do the area, the hollow of the ear right here. And technically you can bring this even darker, right? Because when you get down to the actual inner ear, you can actually use some liner to darken that down. But for now, I'm going to actually make it darker with this. But for now, I'm going to just make it darker with this. And I can double down on that in the future. And that again is going to bring those details out. Now, I also can kind of hit the hollow beneath the cheek bone. But here I do want to thin my paint a little bit more because I want it to be more subtle. You've got a big flat area here, and if you don't try to blend it a bit, it can just look like a big smudge. We're going to be putting more color in here in a moment to make her cheeks a little rosy. But for a guy, for example, if you weren't going for the rosy cheeks, what you would do is just put this shadow in here. So this area here, usually try to shade it just a little bit, bring out that area. It helps to break up this big broad area and brings in the shadow that you usually see under the cheekbone, between the cheekbone and the jawline. I don't bring it up a lot. We could, if we wanted, we could bring out the line as she's smiling, this line around her mouth. But again, if we accentuate that too much, it'll really age her face, and I want her to look younger. So watch out how much wrinkles, again with the crease off the end of the eye, the more wrinkles and lines you introduce to a face, the older it looks. And it's easy to overdo it. So now you can see there's just a little bit more breadth in the face, but we're really, it's a one-note face, right? We could really use some rosiness to this. So to mix blush colors and lip colors that look natural, I always take my skin tone. You could use, depending on what you want, you could use tan skin, or I'm going to be using my base Swarthy Flesh, and you're going to mix in a little bit of red. Now, there are several reds you can use, but what I want you to remember is that using a brighter red versus using a slightly darker red, this is going to give you more that cotton candy pink makeup look, and this is going to give you a more organic, realistic look. This is Pathfinder Asmodeus red, but you could also use like clotted red. Deep red is also another good color for that. I used to use deep red a ton. But if you use this, it's going to be more makeup. You're going to get more a brighter pink, because there's a lot more red pigment in here that's not cut by browns or blues or whatever is used to darken the other color. So I don't really want to go really high-end makeup with her. I want a more natural color for the blush. We could use a more natural color for the blush, and then we could make the lips brighter, and that's up to you. I tend to not like the artificial lipstick kind of thing. So I've got about a couple drops of Swarthy Flesh, and then we've got this a little less than a full drop of Asmodeus red. That's a Pathfinder red. And I'll start mixing it in just to see where I am. And you can see how it's going pretty organic, right? That's a warmer color, but we're not really at a real red yet. Now here is where I might make the decision, okay, maybe now I'll add a slightly brighter red, because I've got a nice organic fleshy pink going on here, but I could use a little bit of punch. So I'm going to put just a little bit of a bright red in there. Now, usually when you're using a brighter red, it's really going to hit it hard. Yeah, that shifted it a lot. But that is a nice blush color. And because you used our starting skin tone as the basis for it, it means that this blush color is going to look good on the skin tone that we're applying it to. So that's why I always start with the skin color that I'm working with and add other colors to it, is that then your shadows or your blushes or whatever you're doing are all going to be compatible with the skin color you've got, and they're not going to look weird or different or odd. So we'll see if this is pink enough. I'm going to add a drop of water to it. I want to thin it down. Again, we're going to be putting it on this cheek. So if it's not at least a little thinned, it's just going to be a little bit too smudgy. We want it to look nice. So a couple drops of water. And the consistency is kind of like that, because I want to be able to layer it a bit. And now let's get a little closer again. There. I grab my pink. And this isn't a real bright rosy color. It's not a huge bright pink. If you really want to portray more somebody who's blushing or sunburned, or, you know, there's a lot of weather, you know, if somebody's been out in the weather a lot, you could go stronger with the red. So you can see that blush color coming in there. I also like to add blush color to the ears, the lower part of the ears. Sometimes on bigger models, I will almost always add a little bit around the nose, but on tiny models like this, the nose is usually just, it's so small already that if you try to add some pink to it, it'll just disappear. You won't really get to see it. So more pink there. Now there's a thing called now there's a principle called color zones of the face, and on 28 millimeter, often it tends to be a little subtle. You can work with it, though. I'll give it to you really quick. What it means essentially is that there are 3 different color zones on a face, and they go from a yellow zone, a warm zone at the top, to a pink or red zone at the middle, and to a bluish or cool zone at the bottom. So you can see the red zone, like I said, is this blush zone where you tend to see reds in the ears and on the sides of the face and around the nose. You know, all this area right across the middle tends to get a little bit of red. And the reason that the upper part of the face is called the yellow zone is that in our skull, the bone presses up against the skin up here. There's not a lot of blood flow, and so our forehead tends to look more golden or yellowy as far as our skin goes, and not as red as this area. And then the cool zone in women, it usually just means leaving things a little bit darker and not warming the jawline up as much. Obviously, in men, if you're trying to do a 5 o'clock shadow, you can very literally do a blue glaze over the jawline to imply the stubble growth. But in women, it just means usually up here I might do a little bit, I might choose a warmer highlight, and here I would just, back off of my highlights, leave it cooler, darker overall with females. So you really see the blush on that side and that side. It adds another dimension to the face. Let's do a stronger color for the lip. Just looking at this and using it, I like its subtlety, but it's not going to make her lips really pop out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab our color. And I'm going to add just a little bit more red. And I'm going to use I'm using violet red right now. It doesn't really matter. It's not a super bright red, but it is more saturated than the Asmodeus red. So there we go. So now we're a little bit more punchy. But you can see there's still a lot of skin tone in it. It still looks natural. If you really want it to look like makeup, don't put any skin tone into your colors for lips and blush, and then it really tends to look artificial. All right. Now, I will often line around the outside of the lip, especially if I am trying to do like a lipstick effect. A lot of women will do lip liner around to define the lip, and then they'll paint in the lip. Here I'm just going to, since I'm going for a more natural look, I'm just going to paint her lower lip this color. The other reason we made this a bit more punchy is that when you're dealing with such small areas, color won't show unless it's a bit more saturated. There we go. So we can get down a little bit more. If you're doing like a goth girl or something, then you definitely want to use that black liner around. You can still see it. Let's just try it. I'll take, I've got some bloodstained red here. It's a really dark red. Let's just try to line that. It will look artificial. It will look more like lipstick, but let's just define that lower lip. And then we can also use that color to paint the underside of that upper lip. Now, technically she is smiling and the teeth are barely visible. So at this point, or before this point, it might be wise to hit those teeth if we're going to. I'm going to chance it and just do the lower lip and then try to fill in. We'll do the teeth probably at the same time as we do the eyes because I'll need an off-white. So I'm going to put just a little water into my dark red, into my bloodstained red. It's a dark, juicy red. I'm going to take a small brush here. This is a 00 Winsor Newton Series 7. Kolinsky Sable. You want to use something with a very fine line. And then I'm going to try to just line it. Around the edge of the lips and define the lips a little bit more. So that's even gotten a little bit too blocky given the shadow I had under there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my tan skin. I'm going to trim up around her mouth and get rid of a little bit of that shadow there that I see. I left it in earlier, but now I'm not liking it as much, so I can take that little key, the kind of like hourglass shaped shadow underneath this lower lip. I want to knock it out just a little. Because that, you can see that shadow there is kind of making our lower lip look really square, and I don't like that. So I'm going to take tan skin, and I'm going to just paint over that shadow a little bit. Kind of sculpt it, take it out a little bit. Given you're looking at this, you know, so blown up, so big, but I still just a little don't like it, so. It's a little better. And the last thing I can do is to create a highlight for that lower lip. So I can grab, if it's lipstick, you want to use a really tiny pure white highlight or close to pure white. If you are doing something more natural, you could do just a very much lighter version of the pink that we used for that lower lip. So let's say we're doing this. I'll grab some white, and I'll grab some of that pink, and I'll make a really, really pale pink color. And then I'll just try to get a really small touch on that lower lip so we can highlight it a little bit. There we go. So yeah, we can see that her little teeth are going to come in at some point, but not this video. I can take that bloodstain color, bloodstain red, and I can do the underside of the lips. If you want to make the mouth a particular shape, like you want to do the Cupid's bow shape on the upper lips, you can do that. There we go. Just makes the mouth a little bit more red, and now we can really see the reds coming out in the skin tones. And there we go. So that's where you put your shadows and your blush and pink tones in the face for 28mm. You can see it really adds a lot of depth to the face to add those little suggestions of detail. Next time we can do eyebrows, eyes, and teeth, and then we'll be set on the face. So there we go, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. I will have a $2 PDF covering these steps also with pictures on my Patreon this month on the $2 level. Also, I'm going to be doing a short video about my schedule for the rest of this year. Some things have come up. You'll probably have noticed that I didn't get many videos out last month. So watch for that, and I'll see you all again soon. Thank you for watching, and this is Anne signing off.